there's still a lot of technology, I think, that we can leverage in the hospitality industry. But I also think that there's so much of going back to the basics as well. I think it goes back to investing in staff, training in those staff members. I notice even when I'm on a project, like how much of an impact you can make when you really sit down with your coordinator or really sit down with that, analyst and explain why you're doing things.
Hello everybody, welcome back to the Future of Hospitality. Actually, this episode is part of our special series, Unscripted Hospitality, where we really just talk honestly, without filters, about industry, trends we're seeing, and of course, the amazing people that are impacted by it. And today's episode is powered by Alhai, leading global sales organization, represent the world's finest luxury hotels and resorts. And so let's dive in. Today, my guest is someone that I'm really excited. Heather Dwyer. We met each other fairly recent through mutual friend, and she has a remarkable journey, moving from the hotelier side, like myself, but, being a very successful business owner, supporting hotels, from a consulting perspective with her Dwyer Consulting, and then also staff and placement agency, Consiére, right? Did I pronounce correct? Or
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So Heather, welcome. Thrilled to have you and looking forward to the chat.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. Growing up in the hospitality industry, I've always admired a lot of people that speak on these podcasts and use it as a way to just, further knowledge in our industry, which is something that I think we're always craving as hospitality people. So I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And talking about that, why don't you share a little bit about your own journey, right? How you got started in the business and then some of the highlights throughout the career that eventually led to be where you are, in your, current place. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I was younger, grew up in an Italian neighborhood, started working in a bakery. That was kind of my first entry into customer service. From there, I worked at community centers and, started doing site visits there at a young age. And I had a mentor there that said, you'd be great in hospitality. I said, what does that consist of? She said, hospitality, hotel industry, restaurant industry. So I ended up applying to University of Nevada, Las Vegas, UNLV, go Rebels. And started my journey out west. Before that, I worked at a golf course, actually a private golf course in Boston. And then when I ventured out to work at a restaurant group in Las Vegas and got my feet wet in food and beverage, catering, private events, all of that, have never worked harder in my life than when I worked in food and beverage, I'll tell you that. Natural progression, was at UNLV. I got an unbelievable opportunity to apply for a post-college management training program with MGM Resorts International. So I was one of the 50 people selected out of about, I think it was 3,000 people that applied to this from all over the country. And I got selected. So I was able to start my hospitality career as far as hotels and, group sales goes in that segment. I rotated in every department in the hotel. So I was a bellman one day, I was valet another day, housekeeping. So I really got a full scope and view of what it was like working in every area of the hotel and really how all of them pieced together. Started my career working in group and convention sales, absolutely loved it. And then I ventured out to California, ended up starting to work for boutique and luxury hotels, which I really, really enjoyed. I found that I could just be a little bit more hands-on in that kind of segment rather than larger hotels. I really like the personalization of boutique hotels. So fell in love with that segment and was doing that for 5 years. And then a little something called COVID happened, which I think we all know what happened with that. I was hanging on by a thread. My hotel closed down. I was luckily able to get absorbed by a sister property, and the sister property, I was there for 5 months, was in the trenches just like everyone else in the hotel industry. We were, doing lateral service, helping fold pool towels, roll-ups for room service. I mean, you name it. We were all doing whatever we could just to come together as a team. Then the inevitable happened. It was unprecedented times. Group business was not coming back. So August of 2020, they ended up deciding to, let the sales arm go, the group business go anyways, because in California, we couldn't have group gatherings over a certain number of people. I had an entrepreneurial itch that was kind of always in me, and it was louder than ever working, at that time, especially when I saw the way that hotels kind of needed to pivot and do things differently. So I took the severance that I got from my company, and I basically put it all into entrepreneurial classes. I invested in a life coach. So really just started to entrench myself and immerse myself in that world. And it was the best thing I could have done. I mean, I would say after kind of looking back and then starting my consulting projects, I think I was a consultant before I knew I was a consultant. I was always the person that when I started a new hotel, I'm like, why don't these Delphi templates upload correctly? Do you know you can upload them differently so the coding matches? Who's your marketing team? How come we don't have a restaurant one sheet to send to customers in Cvent? So I was always kind of the person that was like partnering with marketing, or I was, working with the IT team to fix issues, or just trying to find where the holes were and the gaps were and where I could kind of fill in. I would say probably where I really shined and where my passion was always investing in the coordinators or the junior staff below me. So that was a natural transition into kind of where the trajectory took me after that. So was always the one saying to the coordinator, here, roll your chair over, look over my shoulder. I want to show you what this means. This is why you take this attrition clause out, or when you merge a cancellation grid, this is why you have to change these. So I always just took an interest to mentoring younger staff, because I felt like that's where my success came from, was I had so many great mentors that invested in me and showed me how to do things. So again, I was just always appreciative to kind of send the elevator back down. So starting in my consulting practice, in 2020, and I now just hit, milestone of 5 years not being a W-2 employee. And that's thank you. It is a milestone I do not take for granted. That definitely, when I was rounding the corner to that, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm so grateful. So starting out, I started helping hotels with various projects, and they were like, Heather, can you help us with this? And then it just naturally kind of morphed into me assisting hotels with task force projects. I was helping some non-hospitality companies upskill their customer service as well as their sales organization. But then when I really started working in the task force side of the hotels, I was really starting to see where the areas of opportunity were and where the gaps were. Because it was an unprecedented time in COVID where we had a mass exit of great people, or people got laid off. They shifted to other industries. We lost a lot of knowledge in large, sizable volumes that we had to replace very quickly. So you didn't have the next generation that was training and mentoring the next generation that was taking over these positions in a lot of cases. So again, natural things to me when I was working with these hotels of, well, where's your restaurant one sheet? And do you have a room type one sheet? Or where do you send customers when they're looking for this? Do you have a landing page for that? So I started to notice just the impact I was able to make to kind of, again, bridge that gap of some of the knowledge that was lost in these hotels. And then I started to see just other niches of like maternity leave coverages and hotel openings, or hotels that were transitioning to new owners. And then, that staff left. So I had to duplicate myself in a way. And that's where Consiére was born, where I basically found other great people in the industry that wanted project work and wanted to, help hotels in the same way I did. So I ended up having some people that took a leap of faith with me, and I started to place them at great hotels, some of them at being Al-High hotels, the 4- and 5-star boutique luxury hotels is really where our niche is. And then from there, hotels were saying, Heather, this is great that you found us temporary staff. Are you able to help us find someone full time? And I was like, actually, I do know someone that's looking for a job. So every arm of my organization that I've added, from Dwyer Consulting Company with the training and the coaching and the speaking, and then again, kind of branching off with Consiére with the task force and recruiting and the fractional leadership, all of it was birthed out of basically what the industry needed at that time. So I'm extremely grateful that I'm able to still serve an industry that I love, and it's just doing it in a different way now.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. Well, so first, there's a lot in here, but first, congrats to your point, 5 years, building something from zero in a very challenging, dynamic in our industry. It's not easy, right? And it takes a lot of guts. So, congrats. I know that's just the start. I know, hasn't been easy probably, and you can talk a little bit more, later about that. But a few things that I loved, right? I think number one, if anyone that's listening to this that is considering hospitality, or is studying hospitality, right? Is just about to start the journey, reach out to Heather. I mean, as you heard, she did every type of job that there is, right? So I think, you have great insights into, what takes to perform well in certain areas. To your point about F&B is there's a lot of time requirement. It's a very hard job, can be very fulfilling, but it takes a lot of commitment, right? Holidays, night times, weekends, whatever, to then sales, which is a different type of pressure, a little bit more structure, time commitment in a way, but, you have the constant pressure of delivering results. But I love what you mentioned about pivoting, because, in life, a lot of times we have hard times, right? And you mentioned like, hey, they closed, they let the entire sales team go. So it'd be easy for someone at that time to kind of, give up or feel sorry for yourself. And I loved what you said about, hey, I used every cent that they gave me starting away and invested in myself, right? Investing in my education, my coaching, and my business. So do you think that because of that situation, it kind of helped you had the itch, so it kind of gave you no excuse to go all in and try hard? Or I don't know, how did you process that time?
That's a great question. I think that I'm a type of person that's always a very curious person, and I'm always wanting to learn and try new things. So at that point in time, I thought to myself, okay, what are my options here? Do I go back to another hotel, a different type of hotel? I'm like, okay, I've done the big box hotels, I've done the branded hotels, I've done the independent hotels, the luxury hotels. For me, I was craving a new challenge. I was like, I need to learn new skill sets. I need to try new things. And I also just saw just a very quick glimpse working with entrepreneurs, how they were in control of their business, where that can be scary, right? Because it's a double-edged sword. If they make the wrong decision, they take the accountability for that, right? So your marketing piece failed, your email campaign failed, but I also saw how quickly you could get things done. I'm from the East Coast. We want everything done yesterday, okay? So you give me an idea and I want to see it come to fruition right away. I would say that working with independent hotels where I really thrived is I did have more autonomy there, and things came to fruition much quicker than at bigger companies, but still not fast enough for me. So I think for me, when I was an entrepreneur and I started to create a LinkedIn page or create a website and I wanted to do a lead form, I just saw how quickly things were coming to fruition and how much of an impact it was making so quickly also, So I would say the salesperson in me just felt like, wow, like if I really set these goals and milestones and I see what's happening and how it's coming to fruition, that was just really fulfilling for me.
Wow. That is great. Yeah. Thanks for the share. And then now you're 5 years in, these two different but complementative type of business. Like, what are you seeing right now from the needs of hotels? The things you help usually properties the most. I don't know, what insights do you have to share with everybody from that end?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that staffing in hotels since 2020 has still been an ebb and flow. You do have some of those companies where they were lucky, where they got to retain a lot of staff and or those staff members kind of got to bring up the junior staff members. But I would say in general, I mean, there is still a lot of burnout in the hospitality industry. I have found now, just working in working with other industries and now being in the entrepreneurial world, there's still a lot of technology I think that we can leverage in the hospitality industry. But I also think that there's so much of going back to the basics as well. You know, I think it goes back to investing in staff, training in those staff members. I notice even when I'm on a project, like how much of an impact you can make when you really sit down with your coordinator or really sit down with that, you know, analyst and explain why you're doing things. I am very hopeful for hospitality when I see how much more departments integrate with each other. I mean, back when I first started in hospitality, I didn't really fully understand how revenue tied in and how, you know, digital marketing tied in and ADR and kind of, you know, all those things. And I have found now being on projects that these 25-year-olds, they're speaking dorm lingo. I mean, they are director of revenue managements are really sitting down and explaining to them, you know, what it means when you're kind of setting those rates and transient versus group and group mixes. And I am very impressed in that way. But I would just say, you know, as far as like what I'm seeing, it goes back to, are you investing in the staff and really their quality of life? I know that everyone got a taste of kind of working from home, and we still do get a lot of applicants with our company that say, you know, we want to be part of this company because we want to work remote, which, as we know, we're in a people business that isn't always possible when it comes to hospitality to work remotely. It has certainly, you know, ebbed and flowed and it's changed. But, you know, a lot of companies now are involving DOSs when it comes to kind of ROI and the expectations of owners and doing ownership decks. And so I'm noticing a lot more transparency, I think, overall between, you know, owners and as well as other departments go. So I think just upskilling and being knowledgeable about all those things ultimately is good use of knowledge. But again, going back to the basics of how are you treating your customers? How are you treating your clients? Those quiet luxury service moments are really what it's all about, and what pays the bills, you know, is making clients and customers happy.
Yeah. Yeah, that is great. I've been seeing, to your point as well, and I love that piece, like on better education, more collaboration, more transparency, where because similar to you, when I started my career, you know, I kind of just learned, you know, the little silo of my job, and I had no idea like how the hotel really made money, you know, a little bit, but nowhere near where where it is today. And I think it's great because it helps everybody, right, to make better decisions and understand how each role can really make a contribution, even if you're not in a revenue generation position. To your point, right, just having the ability of building that great experience with a customer, right? You help with the revenue because that person will come back and so on. So I think there is a lot of, you know, more understanding of how it works in the ecosystem. And then on the other hand, I imagine you do this, right? I've been previously with, you know, management companies and brands, and I've been, you know, exposed to very different type of ownership groups, right? You have those that, you know, have long-term investments that really, you know, don't focus too much on the cost for now within reason, right? As long as the value will be there. And then you have those owners that, you know, is their family legacy or that's the everything that they have, and every cent is, you know, truly measured, which sometimes can pressure them to make decisions that is not in the best interest of the overall, you know, business long term. And for you, right, when you're coming in and you see things like this and you believe, hey, yes, I believe you should do X, Y, and Z, that may require investing more than you want, but there could be a better return, whatever the case may be. How are these conversations happening from your end? And if that happens, right? I don't know if you feel or see that.
All the time. I would say, you know, everyone kind of goes in with a plan, and you have a way that you think that things should be done. And certainly there are plenty of industry standards of the way that things are traditionally done. In general, I would say that I learned a long time ago from a teacher, and I myself used to be a theater teacher, is you have to meet people where they are. You can't just dump 20 ideas onto an owner who might not even have a hospitality background. They may be real estate owners and they don't know what ADR is, or they don't understand the complications of uploading a group rooming list, into passkeys. So you have to meet people where they are and show them the value, and you kind of have to reverse engineer it into baby steps. Like, groups expect a group code after they sign their contract, and these are the steps that it takes to get there. This is why you need a group rooms coordinator, because that group rooms coordinator is what produces this and manages that room block and does name changes. So it's really about just breaking things down in a very simplistic way of, this is how it's going to impact your client and your customer, and these are reasons why a group won't come back. Third party does not get paid a commission. They're not coming back to your hotel. You have someone that's frustrated with rooming list changes and housing methods. They're not coming back to your hotel. So it's really about, what does that specific hotel need? And every hotel is different. I mean, if you have remote properties in Hawaii, maybe having a site visit manager makes sense for that hotel. And again, it's laying out what that person's going to do to say, hey, you have all of your salespeople working remotely, but you have clients that want to do site visits and is knowing to do site visits. You need to kind of create this position for your ecosystem, because this is how it's going to benefit your customers. It's more likely that if a customer does a site visit, they're more likely to convert into a sale. So again, it's just a matter of showing that value to that owner and showing them how it's going to impact not only the staff, but also the client and then their bottom line,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And then building on this, what are the biggest needs you see right now from the customers you work with, right? It could be from the consulting or the agency side, the staffing agency. Any common things that you see overall as the biggest needs or kind of trends?
Yeah, I would say outside of staffing, I mean, once you find the right people, it really comes down to training those people and onboarding them properly. I have been in a building where I've walked into an office and they say, yep, we have 2 coordinators here, we have this there, we have this there. And then when I sit down with those people and I ask them, what do you do? I'm a little bit taken back and floored by how much they're not doing for how much they're capable of doing and what that role requires. So I'll say to them, you're merging contracts, right? Or you're merging the proposals and uploading, and you're doing the CVET proposals for your sales managers, correct? And there's so much that people could be doing in those positions that, again, they're finding the right staff. So good news there, they no longer need task force. They found a full-time recruit, but then that full-time recruit is there. You don't want them to be a warm body. You want that person to be in there, and you want to maximize what their skill sets are. You want to make sure that you're sending the elevator back down for them to become the next person that graduates into that senior role that is going to ultimately keep passing that baton to the junior people coming into this industry.
Got it. And what, after you go in a project, what kind of gives you the most fulfillment? Like when you leave somewhere or after a period, what gives you the most joy?
It's always the people. It's the connection that I make with people. It's knowing that I made a difference in their confidence, knowing that something that we built together is sustainable for their hotels. So it's great to go in, put my cape on, be a hero for a day, but that's such short-term fulfillment. For me, it's more about long-term fulfillment. So am I going into this hotel and really fixing like the foundation of the issues, or kind of building an onboarding plan that they now can just copy, paste, and use for the next person. And then just having people years later that I don't even necessarily know how much I impacted them. And I get these, I have one actually right here on my desk, but I get these adorable cards in the mail of, you don't know how much confidence you gave me in my career, or thank you for sitting and showing me that. I know that's not what you were hired for, but I'm so grateful that you took that time to show me that. So I would say just the lasting relationships I have with people is always what's made a difference for me. And that's how I built my business, right? So, I mean, even Cesar, the person you and I met through, I mean, I've known, her for over 15 years. And again, it's really about relationships in general, but in hospitality especially. All of my business that I pretty much have had, I could build, a FBI agent spider web on a big white board showing you how basically all of them have been through referrals. So whether it's someone, referring me a contractor, that contractor introduces me to a new hotel, that new hotel introduces me to a new hotel when they leave. So for me, it's all about, just keeping those relationships going. So yeah, that's what makes me happiest when I leave a project.
That's awesome. Yeah. And it's funny, like to your point about the referral and like how the web works. I remember still today, like I was a really bad student. I don't remember much from college, but what I do remember, one of the things is like one of my professors, said, Cesar, you will not need a resume probably after your second or third job, right? And I was thinking, what is this guy talking about, right? And then it is, right? It comes to fruition and, it doesn't mean you don't need a resume, right? But it's like the calls come, right? The referrals like, hey, they're looking for somebody, meet this person. And then it really allows, and that's one of the things that I really love about this industry. I can't speak to other industries, but I think this industry especially is a lot of this, right? These opportunities, these relationships that you build that you, even if you never worked with someone, you see them in trade shows, you see them in functions, associations, and you develop those relationships and you can really support each other throughout their careers in very, very unique ways. That is, I'm sure it comes extremely handy now as well for you. Even I think especially from the recruiting side, right? Because, to get task force, to your point, people probably had to trust you when you're starting because you're not established business and say, hey, I'm doing this. And then, someone said, yes, right? I will do that. And then to help attract new talent to your customers.
Yeah. And I think it comes down to, I trust other people that are experts in their field. I would never tell a barista how to make my coffee at Starbucks because I don't know how to use that machine. I do know a little bit from my restaurant days, but, I like to say, kind of like, the brand FUBU, for us, by us. I like to say that hospitality, for me with Consiére, it's, we are hospitality people that built this for us and by us, so it's like, I don't claim to be an expert on recruiting or consulting or hotels. I have a passion for it and I know what it takes to really make operational, efficiency and really what makes staff really light up and want to work hard. It's not necessarily about what it is that you want to get out of them from a productivity standpoint. It's what are they really good at that they can actually offer to your organization that you didn't even know they knew how to do. I mean, sometimes I sit and shadow these, 22-year-old coordinators when I'm on a project and I'm like, oh, I didn't know you could do that in Excel, and I'm like, wow, so I think that we always are trying to teach something that maybe we needed to learn. And again, it's great to just be able to have these consultants on these projects and these task force, contractors, because they're teaching hotels knowledge that they're also learning from other hotels. So it's kind of lighting a match and it's, spreading the knowledge throughout all different types of hotels. And, it's not talent that this hotel might have got otherwise if it wasn't just a temporary contractor.
Interesting. On the projects you have been part of from the consulting side, it seems like training the team is a common denominator, right? For the most part. Are there any others that usually there's a kind of a consistency across every place you go, regardless of the type, location?
Yeah, I mean, every brand that I've worked with, they kind of have their own signature that they use. And there's certainly great training companies that I actually refer business to when a hotel needs something that's a little bit more laid out and a little bit more formal, like, teaching like the funnel method, and whatnot. I would say where I try to thrive when I go into an organization, again, is really, I don't have necessarily like a training program that I put into place. I go in and ask them what's working, what's not working. Let me see your market. I kind of delve in and look at some of their reports to see, what segment they're handling. Are there certain industries they're handling? There are certain trade shows that they're not going to. And I tried to kind of do more one-on-one VIP coaching with the teams to try to get them to understand, okay, this is what you need to do for your market specifically that this person over here that has a local market doesn't necessarily need to do. So I would say I approach it in that way. And really, like, when it comes to some of the younger staff too, I mean, it's great. There are companies that have a great onboarding process when it comes to like new hire orientation. They talk about the values of their hotel and the commitment there. But, I try to also kind of delve in with these, coordinators or salespeople and, really just coach them on mindset. So what is it that it takes to be, a great salesperson? Like, are you listening more than you're talking? Like, how are you giving your site visit? Just kind of really talking about like asking questions and not necessarily being the one that's always talking. So a lot of sales etiquette I focus on. Let me see how long your emails are. Are you actually answering the questions that customers are asking you? So again, it's more sales refinement, I would say, than me building kind of like a curriculum of like a sales 101 when it comes to hotels.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then, as you were talking, I don't know why I wasn't necessarily linked to that, but it triggered my mind like, so you spent many years, the majority of your professional career as an employee, right? Where it's fairly structured and all that. And then now you're responsible for your own success, to your point, right? The wins and the losses, it's truly on you and you don't have anyone, right? In theory, anyone else kind of. Was there any like big shock or, I don't know, unexpected things that came in these last 5 years that, you just didn't have exposure to or never thought about as you're getting this started and running?
Oh, yeah. I am a salesperson at heart. I want to make people feel good. I want to bring business in. I want to sign contracts. I was not anticipating all the operational things that I had to do in my business. Taxes, cash flow, payroll, accounting, sending invoices, following up with invoices. So that was certainly a learning curve for me. And that's why early on, I was so grateful when I took those entrepreneurship classes. A saying that people will always kind of, mantra, if you will, in the entrepreneurial world is, hire your weaknesses. So the first person that I brought onto my business was a operations manager. And he runs all of that side for me. So he does all the invoices to clients. He does the payroll to my consultants. They invoice him. They send expenses to him. So I would say that part of the business did not light me up. And that's not where my strong suit was. I know enough to be dangerous. I know how to run it. I know how to run a P&L statement out of my, my QuickBooks and, read kind of cash flow. I had to go down to, my bank and take out a line of credit for the first time because you're only as good as your word. And when you start taking on payroll for 10, 12 people, that's their livelihood. And that's what kept me awake the most, I would say, in my business is not paying myself and going into an emergency fund or, rehearsing what I might, say if I can't, pay someone. I would have never got to that point. And that was the part probably that was the biggest learning curve for me was the financial piece, the, kind of cash flow piece. And then, and then just learning everything that there is to know about partnerships and referrals and LLCs versus S Corp. So all of that, kind of came in baby steps of me learning. And now looking back now, I'm like, wow, that back then it seemed so complicated. And now 5 years in, it's, I can explain an LLC versus an S Corp versus sole proprietorship in my sleep. So
that is awesome. I would have no idea how to go to a bank and make my case, right? I gotta be, I think to your point, there's so many new things that you really gotta just kind of learn, and congrats. That's exciting.
Thank you.
And love the, hire your weakness because it's so true, right? Then really allows you to focus on what you're amazing at, what refuels your bucket, right? Your energy and allows you to be successful and grow, however you want to grow. And then from all the jobs you've had, except for this one now, what was your favorite?
Ooh, I have to say Well, I've had so many great jobs and I've worked with so many great friends. There is definitely something really fun about working in the restaurant business in particular. You do an employee meal before each shift. So, that we used to call it comida. So we'd all come together, we'd break bread, we'd eat, we'd go over the specials, and then we would work a shift. We'd get off. We all kind of had a routine of different restaurants we'd all go to after work to then be waited on, oh, make sure you order 3 of these, get the bottle of the Montepulciano that we love. We'd all like hang out on a Sunday night. I had no email I had to check. I didn't think about, anything that I had to do after I left that job until I had to go back the next day. So I would say I had a lot of fun working in the restaurant industry. I think the breaks after you worked in food and beverage were so fulfilling because you worked so hard during your shift, physically, mentally, just trying to keep the pieces going. I would say that probably working in the restaurant business was one of my favorite jobs that I had.
That is awesome. Yeah, it can be a lot of fun. And to your point, the even though you build a lot of that in sales teams as well, but um, yeah, you get so tight together, right? To your point, because you gotta work in sync 100% every day, but then you have the pre and post, shifts that really builds that super tight and yeah.
Yeah, I think it was at a time in my life too where life didn't feel as serious. So,
Yeah.
my rent was still cheap. I had a roommate, it was kind of just, oh, I'll figure that out later. I was 21 and, 22 years old. So, I would say
Mm.
that was just a lot of fun, just being able to just have that time in my life where I had a lot of really close friends that we just spent so much time together inside of work and outside of work.
Yeah. Got it. And then, as we come towards the close, I have two things that I would love to hear your thought, and I think you have great value to add. One is like, for any listeners that are just really starting, or they're not sure what they want to do, given your expertise and experience, what are some tips or thoughts you can share with them?
Oh, there's a lot. I would say one of my favorite quotes that I always like to kind of sprinkle into my LinkedIn post or even personal post is what Steve Jobs says about the dots don't always connect looking forward, but they connect looking backwards. There was times that I had tough days working as a, W-2 employee where I'm like, why am I the one stuck doing this? Or, like I'm getting so frustrated, no one's calling me back. But you clarity doesn't come from thoughts, clarity comes from action. So I find that a lot of people, that I mentor, which I'm very grateful that I get to mentor, people that are just starting out in their careers. I say, just try something. What you learn from working at a coffee shop, you never know, that may carry on to something that you might use someday, or the way you might organize something in a hotel someday might come from something that you learn, even if it's not the exact same way you learned it at that coffee shop. You might say,
Mm.
oh, well, when I worked at a coffee shop, we used to do our scheduling like this. I'm like, whatever it is, there's so many transferable skills. I would say that, people who are starting out in their career, just listen to what people have to say. You can take it with a grain of salt, but meet up with as many people as you can. Like one thing I did when I got, laid off and let go from my hotel job is I made it a point to always meet up with people for coffee. So whether it was someone that I hadn't talked to in a few years, and then that sparked her talking to me about like independent health insurance. I had no idea how to get health insurance at that time. And that ended up spiraling into me meeting my health insurance broker. And she and I started a networking group together that's local here in Orange County. So each dot can kind of connect to different things that you might not know or realize that might end up being a resource for you someday. And I think to myself, wow, thank goodness that I stopped by that happy hour at IMEX, because if I never had that conversation with this person, I would have never ran into them on the show floor and I met that person. So for younger people just starting out, I would just say, just keep yourself busy, keep your network fresh, ask that person, hey, do you want to go get a coffee after work? Do you want to go grab a cocktail? Whatever it is. I mean, it can't hurt being active. What's going to hurt people from moving forward is being idle. Again, that clarity is not going to come from you sitting on your couch thinking about redoing your resume. No, get your resume done and then email it to someone like me and say, hey, I see you own a, staffing company. Do you mind looking over my resume? Sure, I'll look over your resume and I'll give you pointers. And then I actually have had some of my friends' sons and daughters do that. And I'm like, add your LinkedIn profile, change this picture, and again, I think that there's more people out there in the industry that are willing to help than the younger generation realizes, but also in hospitality. I mean, hospitality people, we fills our cup. We love helping other people. So I would say just reach out. Don't be afraid to reach out.
Yeah, but brilliant recommendations. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think I'll double down on that. I think, I believe that if you call anybody, right? If you would call, I would call, or someone just started to call anyone for, like a tip, I want to pick your brain, almost no one is going to say no, right? Because people generally want to help, and everybody can find 5 minutes or something to help you, or find someone else that can help. But yeah, just asking, right? And worst case scenario, you hear the no, your status quo, then move to the next, right?
Yeah.
And it's amazing how much you can find. And your point about going to that extra reception or whatever. I read a book a couple of years ago called The Power of One More by Ed Milet. And it speaks to that, right? It's like sometimes in life, you're almost there, right? And you give up or something. And sometimes just that one little extra step, or that one little extra meeting can unlock everything, right? And you never know. And that goes also for taking care of yourself, right? So it doesn't mean just go, and then you crash, right? But that resonates.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I even bring that up to salespeople, when I'm going and doing these speaking engagements or trainings at hotels. I say, ask for the referral. I'm like, you never know. Like, hey, do you know any other organizations that are looking to plan a meeting? Or, hey, do you have any other meetings that you plan? I said, the worst they can do is say no. For me, even with recruiting, I'll randomly reach out to someone and say, hey, Cesar, do you know anyone in the Orlando area looking for a new job? And you might say, actually, I do. I'm like, we all have a lot of resources, more than we realize. And I've never seen anyone get upset about somebody asking for a referral or asking a question. So for me, that's how I've built my business, is asking people, hey, I see that you have a position open online. Can I help you with that? And then people say, actually, you can. So you just never know what the answer is going to be. But I would say just don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah, that is awesome. And then finally, Heather's like, what makes you excited about the future? It can be about your business, the hospitality, anything. What makes you like, wow?
I would say what makes me excited about the future and just about, my two businesses is that exactly what we just talked about, the segue, is that there's so much more to learn out there. And there's so many more resources and tools and amenities and things I think that we can bring into this experiential industry. And I think just as technology evolves and as we evolve people more, I just think that there's so much more room to grow for us to have these just really cool experiences on Earth. It's like between like cool bedding or diffusers, white noise machines, restaurants, the curated cocktails. I just think that we keep up leveling as an industry. And again, I'm an innovator and entrepreneur at heart. So I think innovation just really excites me about the future and the new experiences that we can have that we don't even know are possible yet.
Yeah, that is awesome. Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Heather. It's really amazing stuff that you shared, and I'm sure it's going to be super helpful for whomever tunes in, right? Because I think there is great intel for someone that's just started, someone that doesn't know necessarily what to do, someone that knows like, hey, I really want to have my own business, right? And you shared some great tips, things to consider, some lessons along the way. So, very comprehensive. Appreciate you really sharing from the heart, and it has been an honor.
Yeah, same to you, Cesar. Thank you so much again for having me. And I hope something that I said today resonated. And again, reach out and ask. I'm always here if anybody wants to pick my brain on anything.
That is awesome. I'm sure they will. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and until the next one.